Good evening and welcome to the Give Me the Remote podcast, episode 5. It is the 2nd of June. It's the very first time we've ever done a podcast that wasn't in the month of May 2018. We're now in June 2018. My name is John. I'm joined by my regular co-host, Sheridan.
Hi, folks.
And the Dark Queen of Podcasting, Mel. How are you, Mel?
I'm good. Dark Queen of Podcasting.
Now, you're a star of 3 podcasts, I believe.
Yeah, so I run the Podcast Network. We do a Buffy podcast called Chosen, a Harry Potter podcast called Witch Weekly, and a WWE podcast called the Triple Threat Cast. So a lot of recording.
Right, okay, but you normally do that via Skype.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a dog shaking himself. He's a good dog. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, via Skype. My co-hosts are in America, so we have to do it all on Skype. So this is the first time sitting with co-hosts, which is really cool.
Yeah, and a bottle of wine has been demolished before we got started, so we should all be in good form.
Wine, cheese, it's been
our
great.
Opinions out.
That's right. So first one we're going to talk about is Black Panther, which, me being someone who used to work in cinemas, I find it very hard to go to the movies, or to enjoy going to the movies. So I tend to wait until digital release is out. Particularly we watch on Apple Movies. So Black Panther came out this week. I restrained myself from spending the full $24. I went for the $7 rental this week.
Did you watch it at the cinema, Mel?
I went to the cinema.
Yeah, right. How did you go sitting for 2 hours and 50 minutes?
I'm one of those weirdos who love long movies. I was fine. I actually went by myself, so I had my wine, had my snacks, and I just locked in and watched it. And stayed till, like, the after-credit bits and all that.
Didn't have to time your pee break?
No, I just go in, like, go to the bathroom before I go in. I know how to do this.
You're younger than me. Stronger bladder.
Okay, so what did we think of Black Panther?
I thought it was really good. I really liked it. I think it perhaps had the weight of expectations on it for a movie that was meant to, be about black empowerment and
redefining.
Yeah, like I think it probably unfortunately suffers under that, but it was the world that was created in this movie was amazing. Like, it was believable, it was unique, it was, to me, as good as what was in Blade Runner, the Cantina in Star Wars. I think that world creation was really, really good, and something you don't usually see in Marvel movies.
I would have to agree, they really put a lot of thought into it, creating a culture, and they obviously were looking at, like, the African cultures and finding the best way to balance those. And it, like, as a white person, I think they made a good representation. Maybe I'm wrong.
I've actually seen on Quora African cultural experts saying that there are actually some very clever things done with each of the Wakandan tribes representing very distinct overall groupings of African cultures, West African, East African, that sort of thing. And what, like they were saying initially, they were like, "Oh my god, what is this pastiche?" And then they were like, "Actually, this has been done very cleverly," as you would expect for when you're spending millions of dollars on a Marvel movie that's trying to do all these things. I've got to say, about an hour in, and because I've been really hyped up on this, and before I started, I was like, "Oh god, it can't live up to the hype. This is going to disappoint me." Yeah. And an hour in, I was just like, "This is a really good film."
Yeah, same. I agree. I did the same thing. I was like, you know what? I didn't have to be worried at all.
No, it was thoroughly enjoyable, actually. It's one of the ones... There have been a few Marvel movies where I have sat there going, "Oh, this is taking a while." I was invested pretty quickly and just stayed with it to the end and was like, "Oh, it's over."
Some of the Thor movies have been grim.
I love Thor.
Thor Ragnarok was great. Thor 1 was okay. There's only been one movie in the middle.
Yeah, Thor 2 was a bit. Dark World was a bit. But we can review that another time, or you can review it another time.
Sure.
We're talking Black Panther.
We probably won't. We haven't even done Thor Ragnarok because Sarah refuses to watch it, but that was actually fun. I got to say, I had a big problem. The big fight at the end seemed pointless and weird. And also, they suddenly just started killing each other. And it's like, oh, we're a peaceful society, and for thousands of years we've been above all this. And then they're like, oh, let's just all kill each other.
I agree that
it actually
they
shocked
were very
me.
quick to turn on one another. And there was some plot developments there that didn't really make a lot of
because
sense.
I get it, they had the new king and they had to follow him, but you'd also think that they would be able to have their own thoughts to think, oh, yeah, he did beat T'Challa, but this is not good. What we're doing is not good. Maybe we shouldn't do it. Instead of going, this is our new king. We will do as he says.
Yeah.
But also, like, okay, so the in the end, without wanting to be too spoily, they're sending out these weapons to stage revolutions around the world, and then T'Challa's coming back saying, no, don't do it, and then they're like, kill the pilots. I'm like, why don't you radio the pilots and tell them there's a disputed chain of command, return until it's resolved? Wouldn't that be the thing? Instead of, no, let's just murder them.
And there was a bit of a thing with Killmonger, who... So the story is
also, he seemed really cool. Why did he get a shit name like... Oh, there go over the language. But because I think they had to give him a name like that to make him a baddie, because otherwise he was actually the best character in it.
Is it based on the comic book, though? Because they could have taken the name from the comic book. I have admittedly not read that much Marvel.
Yeah, it probably is from the comic.
Maybe, but these movies have to stand on their own. And
people listening, let John and Sheridan know if it's from the comic book.
Yeah. Email to gmtrpodcast@gmail.com. Or leave your comments on Twitter, Facebook, and the Libsyn website.
But the story, for anyone who's listening that doesn't know, is that
it's the Lion King.
It
actually is just the Lion King.
There's this country in Africa. It's a fictional country called Wakanda. Wakanda, sorry. Sorry, Wakanda.
And
they have...
I've just sort of interrupted you to say... Marvel, to their credit, in the 1970s, did create this fictional African kingdom where black people had a superior, advanced civilization, and their hero was the Black Panther, and they were writing comic books in the 1970s, and they were miles ahead of anything that was happening in Hollywood in terms of having these characters, and also Luke Cage in that period, and a bunch of others. But yes, Wakanda as...
Wakanda. It's a U.
Wakanda. So they have a specific resource that enables them to produce all sorts of technology, basically not suffer from hunger. This thing is just amazing.
And they hide it.
But they hide it from everyone, and then...
Because they've had a good look at the world.
But arguably, quite rightly, Killmonger, who was growing up in Oakland in California, descendant of one of the Wakandans, thinks maybe we should try and use this technology to better the world. So, get rid of poverty, empower the entire black people all over the world. But the Wakandans go, no, we're keeping it for ourselves. And it kind of makes them assholes.
Yes.
It does, although at the very end, T'Challa is saying, okay, we're going to, share with the world and make it better, and then he goes and speaks at the UN, which a
lot of stuff happens, though.
Did you notice how all the white institutions, which there are very few of in this film, but the British Museum, they misname and misplace.
Well, I think that was a deliberate.
And the United Nations, they misname and misplace.
I mean, that was deliberate.
So I think they're having a little joke with that.
They don't misname the CIA, who, Martin Freeman. I think he was somewhat miscast in that role, actually.
I thought he looked like a reasonably suave,
I don't believe he was a CIA agent. He's a dork.
I thought he pulled off the role reasonably well.
Because he's so British, even though he had an American accent on, I just unfortunately thought of every other role he's done.
Same.
It was like The Hobbit, Sherlock Holmes, and Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yes.
All I could think about.
Yeah.
Which is hilarious, because every other time, like, Amazing Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, that's him. Hobbit, that's him. I don't do that usually, but this time I was like, that's that guy.
Yeah. And
wasn't it quite the Lord of the Rings reunion, though, wasn't it?
Yes, they had him and Andy Serkis.
Oh, they did too. Andy Serkis is great in this. I didn't realise Andy Serkis was such a big dude. Because he's always, I don't know, I just think of him
he's gotten old.
He's gotten bigger. Like,
but he was chunky if you ever looked at the extras on the Lord of the Rings DVDs.
In the originals, he was a lot less chunky than he is now.
He had quite the belly in that
bodysuit. In the body. Everyone has a belly in a bodysuit.
Not everyone, Mel.
I
most
actually
people.
think the supporting cast in this movie is what actually makes it.
Yeah.
They're all... There's actually a lot of characters in this film, and they're all given something to work with.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, T'Challa, the protagonist, I mean, he keeps talking as if he's Nelson Mandela. And Nelson Mandela was a very old man when he spoke like that. And but it's almost a bit ponderous. I mean, when Forrest Whitaker's outpacing you, there's a bit of a problem there, I would have thought. But
Forrest Whitaker and Angela Bassett, they do add a certain gravitas to the film.
I'm just disappointed Samuel L. Jackson couldn't get into
No,
this.
you know what?
He's only in the Marvel Universe!
I actually thought to myself, I'm so glad Samuel L. Jackson's not in this film.
And,
They had good actors in this film.
Whoa! Lawrence Fishburne, where was he?
And Lawrence Fishburne wasn't in there, yeah.
I will say, being a little bit feminist, I really enjoyed the women in this film. They were so practical. Like, I love the scene they're in a casino or something, and the fight's about to start, and they kick off their heels.
I totally agree. And when, what's her name from The Walking Dead?
I don't watch The Walking
Dana Guerrero, I think it is. Anyway, she's from The Walking Dead, who plays one of the leaders of the army that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And she's fighting in a dress. And you know what? That dress doesn't have a split up to her vajayjay. It's just a dress. Like, they're not sexualized at all. I loved that too. I totally agree.
Well, it's really cool in that, yeah, I mean, there's a whole lot of Bechdel tests that's obviously actually been done to this. There are women just talking about things because they're two women who have to talk about things, and men don't need to be involved in the conversation at all.
And the conversation doesn't need to be about men.
Yeah. But also that the centre of gravity of the action is between Africa and Korea. Okay, there's a little scene in London, but even then, it's like, you know,
you have the CIA. America.
Well, yeah, but he's still a very sideways role. I mean, I just loved when Killmonger took the vibranium axe head from the Great British Museum, which I was like, it's not a real thing. But you know, it was a bit weird the way the museum curator came out to talk to some random dude who happened to be.
Yeah, I did think that was a bit weird having worked
Suspend
as a curator.
your belief.
Yeah. But anyway, so she came out to talk to him, and he started asking her questions, and then he was saying, "I'm going to take it." And she's like, "You can't just take it." And he's like, "How did it get to be here? You just took it. I'm just taking it."
Quite a good comment on colonialism and artifacts in museums generally.
Yeah. No, I thought it was a point well made. A lot of people, and I'm one of them, are like, Killmonger's way cooler until he took his clothes off, actually, and then he was a bit over the top, I felt. But,
well, this is the problem that I have with this movie, and it's just a slight problem, is that, like we were saying before, is they're kind of arsehole-ish how they're not going to let this, you know, technology be released to the world and do better. And then Killmonger comes in with what seems at first like this sensible idea of, no, you guys should, you know, be helping people.
Well,
but then
his idea of helping people was to murder everyone.
Well, that's right. He just turns evil. So then you're like, oh.
The thing I find is a lot of Marvel villains at their core have a really great idea, and like maybe if they just marketed it better.
Yeah. Their solution's not good. They've got great sort of concepts.
Marvel have been weirdly weak in their villains for a long time, and Killmonger's probably one of the better villains that they've had. Which is odd because in the comics, Marvel's had some absolutely amazing villains. I mean, Magneto. What am I saying? Magneto's a great villain, but I don't think the X-Men have played him to his best. I don't know. Anyway. This lived up to my expectations. Yeah, the fight at the end was a bit weak, and why did the barking mountain tribe come down like the eagles in the Return of the King to save the day? That wasn't entirely clear or discussed.
No, they worked it out. I can't remember the reasoning. I'm going to admit it, but I remember watching.
There was no reason.
There was a reason. They worked it out. Like, first of all, they saved T'Challa's life. Sorry, spoilers, but come on, the hero lives, of course.
Yeah.
And then
it is the Lion King.
Yeah.
I mean, the plot of The Lion King and the plot of this is weirdly the same.
It's like Avatar and Pocahontas.
Okay.
Strangely, it's a plot that's been going throughout several movies.
Yeah, but and what was up with Martin Freeman doing the Macarena to destroy those two planes?
I didn't notice this either.
So there's this moment where he's got to shoot down all the planes because he was a fighter pilot.
Yeah.
And
he's in the fake
two
plane.
planes put him in tractor beams. And then he gets this instruction that if he crosses his arms and puts his hands on his hips, it'll blow them up somehow.
Who knows?
I missed it.
I don't know, but I love T'Challa's sister.
Oh, she was the best. She actually was the best character.
Mm-hmm.
Funny, sarcastic,
Yes.
smart,
Oh,
kicks
yes.
ass.
Kicks ass. She's got her like little handgun things.
Yep, she
Her
was
punching guns.
Great, I loved her. She was in that Black Mirror episode, the last one from last season.
I haven't.
There were
Black Mirror.
so many Black Mirror actors
There are,
in
yeah.
this, which I think is just great.
Well, at least
that-
two. I think there's only two.
I think if you dug down into the extras, you'd have a few more. But
So I think it'll be Letitia Wright, who played the sister,
yeah,
and Daniel Colleray.
he's the
who
guy
played
who
Wakabi, and
held the glass shard to his neck, and in Black Mirror, right?
Yeah, but he also was in that awesome film from last year, Get Out, that horror film.
Yeah. So he's going. I just love that people doing. Well, Black Mirror is a big franchise now, but when we started watching it, it wasn't, and the Fate has made stars out of so many people by doing such great stuff. I love.
Yeah.
We should probably do Black Mirror in this podcast.
We should one day.
But we've been talking for 16 minutes on.
It's
Black
a good
Panther.
movie.
We talked for 6. Well, really, minute for minute. I think this review probably actually works out quite a good ratio, given how long
How long?
that film is.
It's only 2 hours and 5 minutes.
I think I have to say,
Is that counting after credit scenes?
Oh, there's
there's
so
two
much
or
after
three
credits,
after credit scenes.
and they're really important.
But I just think I get it. Well, I think why they're doing it is they need to have a reason for people to spend money at the cinema. So you got to have more than the regular hour and a half. But I'm done with it. Like I don't want to have to actually plan an evening when I have to watch a movie because it's so long. Like if I'm at 8:30 at night and I'm like, oh, it's too late to watch Black Panther because I've got to go to bed. Like there's something wrong in the world.
You mean you'll just need to toughen up a bit?
Well, it shouldn't be like that. You shouldn't be able to just put a movie on after, later before you go to bed and watch it and then go to bed. Not have to be up at like midnight.
Well, there are shorter movies. The Deadpool movies are more reasonable lengths.
They are.
So it
Yeah, but a
depends.
Deadpool movie's like a punk rock song, it's over.
But that's good. I think they need to. That was my one fault with this film, other than the issues with the plot that we were talking about before, and just the character development on some of this is a little bit two-dimensional. But is the length? It's too long.
What would you have cut out?
Well, I literally fell asleep and woke up the next day and watched the rest of it.
Okay, but I just feel. I actually feel that the last third of the movie was underdeveloped and probably actually needed more, or maybe they should have made 2 movies, or maybe they should have.
I think they should have made 2 movies. When after the plot line with the Andy Serkis character finishes, that's one movie.
Yeah.
Could have made a whole other movie about
How they all turned on each other, which actually was pretty significant, but was like 5 seconds of airtime.
It was intense, and it was actually surprisingly shocking.
Yeah.
When they all start stabbing and shooting and blowing their own planes, I was like, this isn't right. This isn't Wakanda.
There's a literal couple that go to kill each other.
Yeah, that was pretty intense.
There's a lot of couples that are pretty close to that, though.
Should I leave?
I was going to say, you don't know what happens after the podcast, Mel.
Okay, look, is there anything else either of you would like to say about Black Panther?
No.
How many stars?
You go first.
4.5.
Oh, I don't do half stars though.
Yeah, you don't have to.
I don't see actually why we have a system where I don't think you should be able to give them out either.
Oh, I can give you whatever number of stars I like.
It's like 4 3/4.
I gave 0 stars last week, and that blew your little mind.
I'm actually gonna go 5 stars.
Wow. Even though you fell asleep in the middle and had to come back to it the next day.
Yeah.
Okay, you have got a cold in your defence.
Yes, I
And
do.
Mel?
I'm also going to give it 5 stars. I thought it was a really solid superhero movie. Like, on the scale of considering it's a superhero movie, definitely a 5-star movie.
I would watch it again.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Alright, what's next?
So, Evil Genius.
Alright, so Evil Genius, for anyone who doesn't know, is a true crime documentary based on the pizza bomber
Pizza collar bomber.
I think he's either called the collar bomber or the pizza bomber.
Okay, and this is a Netflix.
It's on Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
So in 2003, this guy robbed a bank with a collar bomb around his neck that was thought to be fake, and police accosted him after the bank robbery. He only got away with like $8,000, and he was sitting, with all the patrol cars around him, seeming reasonably calm for a point in time, and then suddenly the collar starts beeping, and he's like, "It's going to go off, it's going to go off," and it went off and killed him.
And that footage, I mean, that is the most... It's quite early in this whole thing, and you're like, oh my... It's a snuff film. Why am I watching a snuff film? I didn't know it was legal to watch a snuff film.
So, I knew about this through podcasts that I'd listened to. It comes up in a lot of true crime podcasts. But one of them had said the news footage cut out. So there was something wrong with the camera. So I always assumed they never actually got the footage that's saying it got wrong with the camera. No, they just meant the broadcast cut out. But they got the footage, obviously. Yeah. And so when it happened, I was really surprised. So I'm like, oh yeah, the footage will stop any second now. Oh God!
Oh, pink mist. There we go. And then the police, to the chagrin, the family is beautifully outraged at his treatment, which is nice. The police cut his head off so they could remove the bomb collar in one piece to examine it.
Which really upset the family. They treated the bomb with more respect than our... And I couldn't get it. One, they had to maintain the evidence. And two, they still weren't 100% sure what was going to happen at that stage.
Yeah, no, I understand why the police did what they did, but I can also understand why the family were, particularly with what happens later in the show. The family have a great deal to be very upset about.
So the story is basically about whether this guy who died, Brian Wells, was involved in this bank heist, and there's a range of eccentric, quirky characters that are really an insight into Middle America.
Hang on. Eccentric and quirky.
Yeah, maybe mentally ill.
Murderous weirdos.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, you're probably right. I'll cop that one.
Eccentric and quirky is, walking down to the shops in your bathrobe. I mean, the number of bodies in this show are just astonishing.
So 2 people end up getting charged with not conspiracy to murder, but I think conspiracy to use a deadly weapon in a crime was what something they were charged with. So the evil genius apparently in this show is a woman called Marjorie Del Armstrong, who is, I think it's fair to say by all accounts, was a mentally ill woman.
Definitely.
Hang on, how many dead boyfriends does Marjorie have?
2.
5.
5?
Yeah, that was in the show.
Oh, yes, it was 5, sorry.
I think she went to court over 2 of them.
Yeah, okay, but
Yeah, but there's 5 suspiciously dead boyfriends, and 1 was found in the freezer.
Yeah.
Yes.
1 was found, and in the course of this investigation, police happened to find a different murder.
Well, no, it was the... Oh, what's his guy? Kenneth something, who calls in trying to get heat off... Kenneth Barnes, trying to get heat off the collar bomb thing by going... I helped my girlfriend.
Oh, no, that was William Rothstein.
Yeah, sorry, Rothstein. Sorry. Rothstein calls going, oh, I've done something bad. I helped my girlfriend hide the body of her boyfriend in a freezer.
There are so many twists and turns in this series. It's actually hard to keep up with it. Like, I was trying before the podcast to have, like, a summary of how you would explain what went on, and it's actually impossible to do it.
Well... Exactly. I've listened to 3 podcasts on this crime, and then I watched the documentary, so I'm like, oh, I know that one, I've heard it. And I just vaguely get what happened, or what they allege happened.
Yeah.
And then there's, of course, going, well, was Brian Wells involved or wasn't he involved? This is why he could have been involved. This is why it doesn't seem he was involved. This is why it seems that, sorry, I've forgotten his name again, the one who called in about the body. Rothstein. Yeah, if it was actually he knew about X amount, but then Rothstein decided to, because Rothstein was dying anyway, that he would do this whole bomb thing to have a moment of power.
Yeah.
There is a possibility that they don't fully explore, that the reason, because Rothstein had an on-again, off-again relationship with Marjorie for her entire life, that maybe the reason her boyfriends kept dying was because Bill was offing them.
Well, I actually think one of the problems with this series is that they don't and I sort of, it's excusable in a way because it is so complex, but they don't actually interrogate a lot of the twists and turns. They just put them out there for you and then kind of leave them and go on to the next twist or turn. They don't actually they don't commit to a single viewpoint about what they think happened or...
Yeah, which is where my judgment on it kind of gets a bit whacked, because I also have all the other podcasts
where they do make that
judgment. So now and then I'm like, wait, what happened in the show? What happened that I know about? So yeah.
Also, I've got to say, Brian Wells as a character, obviously it's tragic how he died.
But he's not a really sympathetic character.
Well, he's weird because he's supposedly working as a pizza delivery dude.
Well, he's like a 47-year-old pizza delivery guy. He's sad.
He's a 47-year-old pizza delivery guy who goes on gambling trips with his buddies, has a regular relationship with a prostitute. Now, admittedly, not the most attractive prostitute in the world, but not cheap either. And also has a serious amphetamine habit, apparently. And I'm like, unless when people were ordering a pizza with the lot from his pizza delivery place, he was taking a lot more than pizza, maybe that was what his gig was. Maybe that explains all the other things. But he seemed to live a lifestyle that I cannot imagine someone making a sole income on pizza delivery living.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's something... There's a whole lot of stuff that's going on that you don't really see.
There's a lot of money sloshing around in this. This isn't poverty porn like these documentaries normally are.
Yes.
Like Marjorie's got tons of money.
Well, her father has tons of money.
And then she sued all these people for got
defamation and stuff.
Yeah, so she had money. She had chunks, big chunks of cash sitting around. Bill is now, admittedly, he's kind of screwing his rest of his family and living in the house that his parents died in, rent free, and refusing to do anything with it. But Bill's not poor either. And the town it's in is not your typical poor town. It seems like quite a wealthy, well-appointed Pennsylvania township. This isn't Rust Belt stuff going on. This is...
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, all the shots of the city. I mean, admittedly, Making a Murderer, which is obviously my obvious comparison of a series, the town there looks pretty well-appointed as well. But when they do shots of the town, it's not... poor, degraded.
One of the things I found frustrating about this show is, like, Making a Murderer and a lot of these true crime stories are about problems with the criminal justice system or the healthcare system, and to explain it. But this lacks any of that.
Maybe it's something that can't be explained.
No, yeah, that's true.
It's a bunch of, unfortunately, mentally ill people who decided they needed money for various reasons.
I don't think they needed money. I think they definitely wanted money.
Well, didn't Marjorie want the $250,000 to take a hit out on her father?
Yes.
Yeah, they do allude to that. Yeah.
Let's move on from that for a second. We might come back to it. How do we feel about the way the documentary maker becomes so personally involved in the story?
It was very different for me. For a true crime documentary. Like, I've seen other documentaries, like, about the food system and everything, so factory farming, where someone becomes very involved and...
Okay, so Morgan Spurlock, like, eating himself into things, but the way he personally prosecuted and developed relationships...
Yes, it was very different for a crime documentary. I don't know how I feel about it exactly. I think in some ways it took away, in other ways it added. So there was that more personal note where he knew these people in some form, but at the same time it felt like, because of that, it was influenced in a way that obviously a documentary where they weren't face to face with the people and developing personal relationships, it would have been more objective.
Yeah. Because the co-director of this film, Trey Borzilleri, I think his name is. Anyway, he develops a personal relationship with Marjorie that goes for a decade. Where he's writing to her back and forth and talking to her on the phone in prison. And I agree with you, Mel. Like, there is something that's actually different about that to regular true crime shows, but I don't know. I can't work out either whether it adds or takes away, because there's something off about it in a way. And
she gets very offended. Marjorie gets very offended when he starts talking to people who obviously don't agree with her version of events. Very offended, and calling him and saying these people are BS and don't listen to them.
An insight into her personality that you wouldn't usually see in a true crime documentary, but I don't know if it doesn't actually help solve the crime, which is kind of what true crime documentaries are about.
So I'm not an expert in true crime documentaries like you two ladies are. I am reasonably familiar with more general documentary formats. I watch a lot of documentaries. Normally in a documentary, a subject will come in for an interview, and in a good documentary, you'll never even hear the questions that they're being asked.
Yeah, you can't do that when you're doing it on a prison.
No, I know, and this is where it's really different. But I think this is where I've got my problem, is that they don't do a very good job of splitting up what is footage of interviews, because they've got a lot of footage of police interviews. Sorry, police interviews. So it's just police recording and interview someone talking. And then you've got something where someone has come in to sit down in an interview with the documentary maker, and then you've got these Skype calls with Marjorie and the documentary maker, and there's nothing on screen saying...
telling you the difference.
Yeah, and I really feel, for me, figuring out as I'm watching it what I'm looking at and what its context is.
That's interesting, because I felt like watching so many true crime documentaries, like I knew the difference.
Yeah.
But if you're not really familiar with that genre, maybe you didn't know.
And I could tell how it would appear messy to someone who's not familiar and who doesn't follow it as much.
Speaking as a journalist, I've got some reservations for the way the makers of this got so personally invested and didn't identify to the audience.
Well, I think actually the weird thing is that the most interesting thing, or one of the most interesting things about this series, is his relationship with her. But they don't really go into it beyond just playing the tapes and reading the letters that she sent.
Yeah.
They don't really describe how it happened.
Yeah, they reveal a bit, which I think is good. I would have liked a bit more disclosure.
Yeah, because pretty much he kind of says, oh yeah, I've got a relationship with her, and she talks to me. I've just lost where I was going with that, but it's something like, she obviously is really willing to talk to him when she doesn't seem to talk to many other people, apart from say, this person talks BS, I'm going to sue them, and that's like all she says. But she's more happy to talk to him.
And she's, clearly when she's talking to him, she's, I mean, I'll say clearly, but my view is, from what I saw, is that she's quite mentally ill when she's talking to him. But they don't really kind of answer the question of whether she was mentally ill at the time of the crime. And that, I think they should have worked through a little bit. Well,
I mean, mens rea hasn't come up as a proper issue. Obviously, she's in a psychiatric hospital, so...
And she was found incompetent to stand trial.
Yeah. Now, I mean, the issue that... And again, they come at it weirdly obliquely late in the series, that the absolutely crucial issue at play is that if Brian Wells, who got blown up by the bomb collar, had actually been in on the conspiracy, then he's a co-conspirator in what led to his death, and it's not a capital crime what happened to him. If he wasn't in on the conspiracy, then all of the conspirators could be executed for it, and that is actually the mortal crux of the show. Is that conundrum,
which is the problem I sort of have with it, is that they don't interrogate these issues with the US criminal justice system and why they end up making these prosecutorial decisions that they do. It's just sort of very superficial.
Yeah, I mean, there is a beautiful moment where Brian Wells', I think, brother or cousin is saying, how is the victim of this crime being put on trial for it?
Well, that's the weird thing, because there's evidence that he was in on it, but I never could believe that he knew that was a live bomb.
I totally agree.
Or if he found out after it was put on him, he genuinely thought he could survive it, because the investigators drove the route and found the clues they could, but it just abruptly ended.
Yeah, and his demeanour in that video footage, he does not look like a person who's got a live bomb on him.
Yeah, and then
so when it starts beeping,
and then he starts panicking.
Like, oh, this shit was not meant to happen.
Yeah, then he starts panicking.
I personally, and obviously my personal views on justice are not. I'm not a high court justice. I still think that if you kill someone, whether they were involved in a bank heist with you, the act of murder is unrelated to that. In my view,
they did go to prison for 45 years. I think Kenneth Barnes' sentence was. I mean, that's longer than you would get in Australia for murder, even. But I mean,
come on, this is Australia. Our sentencing is problematic at the whole of
yeah.
the
I'm just saying, like, and they all did die in prison, which is one reason we're allowed to watch this documentary for sure, because they're all dead.
Is Marjorie dead?
Yep, she's
I
dead.
missed
Yeah.
that. Okay.
Yeah, they're all dead. But and this is I think we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago with another documentary. But I think it was the Dr. Dre one anyway. But the proliferation of the ability to take video content from the 2000s onwards is now letting us watch all these documentaries that we would never have seen this footage. Because it's so cheap to record and keep.
Yeah, I mean, I would
say
we should probably in a future podcast talk about Adam Curtis documentaries, because I mean he's a master at going back into the 1940s and onwards and finding old archival footage.
Yeah, but that's an expensive, time-consuming job. Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, yes, we should definitely talk about Adam Curtis documentaries in the future.
Well, it's going to get real political then, isn't it?
It's going to get ugly. But look, Evil Genius, it's a fascinating insight into a weird corner of America.
I love watching these documentaries about American suburbia and this dark underside of the greatest nation in the West there.
Well, look, I think the Snowtown murders in Australia are crying out for the same
But I think
treatment.
everyone sort of thinks Australians are a bit murdery.
Yeah,
South Australians.
We've got Ivan Milat.
Ivan Milat, what's his name out the...
Hey, it wasn't Ivan Milat, was it? We all know the family was in on it.
The Susan Lee.
Catherine Knight.
There's a lot of outback killers.
Oh yeah, Catherine Knight's an outback, but still, she's pretty freaky.
Yeah.
We're known for the freaky murders.
Yeah. But we do, however, have a defamation system that stops anyone saying anything about anyone. And a deputy prime minister who believes in burning houses down when people talk about the wrong things. So, former deputy prime minister.
Got very specific, a little bit.
Former deputy prime minister. No, he doesn't believe that. He just thinks it might happen. Anyway, how many stars?
And this is how your podcast gets sued.
I've tried to say this to him a few times.
I've been sued for defamation. I know what gets you sued, and we're not crossing that line. I promise you. So, is there anything else either of you would like to say on this subject?
I just want to say, like, the case is really, really interesting, and obviously watch Evil Genius, but I'd recommend anyone who gets interested to look up other media of it.
What podcasts have you listened to that you like?
Case File.
Oh, I didn't know Case File did a podcast, and if anyone is listening and hasn't listened to Case File, listen to Case File.
It's a really good show. I think it was Insight might have done it, but I'd have to check. Yeah, Insight's a good one as well, but I'm pretty sure it was Insight. So, yeah.
Okay.
How many stars?
Look, I'm going to give it 3. I'm docking at 1 just because I feel the producers' relationships needed to be better documented internally.
I'm actually going to give it 4 because a little bit of... actually not a little bit... A huge problem I have at the moment with true crime on Netflix is it's very repetitive. You're constantly being shown sort of in the tabloid-style journalism the same interviews over and over, and it didn't do this. There's faults where it didn't go enough into a lot of the twists and turns.
It just could have showed that bomb core exploding every 5 minutes, and they didn't do that.
But every episode is new information, and as a true crime fan, that's actually what you want. So I'm going to go 4 stars.
I'm going to go 3.5. Can I do halves?
You
split
can.
The difference.
I don't do halves.
You don't do it? No, because I agree. There was a lot of repetitiveness, which kind of indicates to me that they didn't do the best they could have done because they didn't go into those twists and turns that we discussed. And I'm also going to agree with John where they should have had a bit more disclosure about the relationship between the documentary maker and Marjorie. I think just to clear it up would have been nice.
Yeah,
but overall, enjoyable. It's a true crime case I'm quite interested in, and I am enjoying a lot of the Netflix true crime ones. Yeah. Like, I loved Wild Wild Country.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah.
Did I give that 4 stars? I must have. Yeah, I would have had to.
Interestingly, the Daily Telegraph just this week felt the need to revisit Wild Wild Country and say, "Oh, it's so good," and here's what we think about the Rajneeshis. It was an interesting article.
I think that was a a good documentary.
Just getting a couple of hours of Sheila talking about why she did what she did is an interesting piece of history.
She's amazing. She'd probably actually be on my list of people I'd invite to a dinner party.
She's fierce.
Yeah,
she would be fun at a dinner party. Okay. So, Mel is staying with us, even though she hasn't watched the next two shows we're going to talk about. She will chime in as she feels the need.
I might want to watch them after you reviewed them.
We can only hope.
That's what the point of this podcast is, isn't it?
And in that spirit, what's next?
We're going to do Steve Martin and Martin Short's... I don't know what the name of
I think it's just called Steve Martin and Martin Short.
Anyway, it's a Netflix special for a show that they did.
Now, I went into with some trepidation. I was like, why are two old men of yesterday doing a special on Netflix? Netflix comedy is for raw, new talent.
Especially after our review last week of Jerry Seinfeld's show.
Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, which we did not like at all. So I was like, oh God, it's going to be more boring old men being boring. But some little part of me said, you know what? I've always actually liked Steve Martin.
I loved Steve Martin. Dirty Rotten Scoundrels is actually one of my all-time favourite movies.
Yeah, nothing's particularly highbrow that he did in the day, but you know, he did great movie after great movie. There were some duds along the way.
Yeah, but I mean,
but for a total body of work, there was just something there. And I think we got about 15 minutes into this, and I was just like, this is like drinking vintage champagne. You know, the bubbles are small and the flavours are a bit quirky.
It's like going home to your bedroom at your parents' house and getting into your bed and feeling all comfy and secure.
Yeah, my parents got rid of that room.
Yeah, well, see, you just have to watch that show to know that feeling.
Watch that show, know that feeling.
My parents just did that to me too. They've just told me, by the way, when you come next time, your room's now an office and you'll be staying in this other room.
Okay, so you two need to watch Steve Martin and Martin Short because it's got that...
Mel might be too young to actually have watched Steve Martin movies.
I would also say it was like
She's nodding.
It was like watching Muppet Show episodes from the 1970s.
Again, Mel doesn't know that.
Not from the 1970s. I do know the Muppets from...
Okay.
Like their movies.
The movies. Yeah, okay.
Their Christmas Carol,
you
Treasure
need to
Island.
actually go back and watch the original Muppet shows, which were... When I was watching as a kid, I had no idea quite what I was watching, and all of the guest stars were unknown to me. I was like, who's this human being who's wandering into the show? And you watch them again today, and it's like, oh my God, this is the really important big people doing this Muppet Show thing. And I think that's probably the best comparison I can make. It's like watching old Muppet shows, particularly because some of the forms of humour they use in this show were old back when these guys were young, tearing up the Los Angeles comedy scene in the 1970s.
It is old school style comedy, like
there are song and dance
show,
numbers, yeah. But it's so well done.
Oh, and they're self-aware of their age and their privileged position in life, but they're still funny, not in a try-hard sort of overextended kind of way.
The only time they're mean is about themselves.
They mean exactly, and they make jokes about Steve Bannon being an Uber driver. So they bring some contemporary humour in, but at the end of the day, what you actually get is Short doing impersonations and physical comedy, which he is just. I mean, the guy is like, how old was he? He said how old he was.
They've got to be in the 70s.
Yeah, but I mean, for the physical comedy that he pulls out, given his age, is pretty amazing.
Oh, I mean, they make jokes about how they're both wearing Spanx. I mean, but there's probably... They don't miss a single beat. I mean,
they're consummate professionals.
Yeah. Some comedians don't get better with age. They get sad. And
like Jerry?
Yes.
Like Seinfeld, who is just appalling now. At least in Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee is terrible. But these guys are just like, we're putting on a show. I think it's because they're putting on a show. They're not saying, this is just going to be us hanging out together.
They knew they had ticket-paying audience members.
Yeah.
And they had to fulfill something. And they did that.
Yeah.
And, it's not amazing. Like, I'm not going to remember this probably in 5 years' time. But it was a nice hour of TV. I enjoyed myself.
Yeah, it's a perfect Netflix special because you put it on and you're like, oh, I'm glad I put this on. This is a good use of my time.
I felt nice during it. It was comforting. It was funny. It was intelligent. It was all round good.
Yeah. And it also reminded me again of, I guess, of just how great a lot of other things Steve Martin did were. So it's...
My main problem... sorry. Mm-hmm. Feminist has to talk. There's not a single woman in this show. No. Including in the band.
Piano player, band. I think they cut to a picture of a woman in the audience once.
You know, that's something they've all got to address.
Yeah.
Calling it out.
Do you think they should put, like, Shelley Long on stage to join them? Or another... Well, Roseanne Barr, I guess, would be an obvious.
I don't know how that would have gone down. But I'm just saying...
Yeah. I hear your point, but, you know, we have got the Ali Wong specials, and we've reviewed them very highly.
Yes, it's not about our problem with gender diversity, it's about theirs.
Alright. I'm not going to let that take away from what is... there was a moment where it particularly was like blew my mind when Steve Martin starts talking about how when he was a young up-and-coming comedian, Elvis came into his backstage.
Great, yeah.
I had no idea Steve Martin was that old.
Yeah.
But God,
Steve Martin looks friggin' good for his age.
I mean, they do make a beautiful joke reasonably early on how Steve Martin has looked like he's 70 for his whole life.
I don't know. He's looking like a pretty good 70-year-old.
Yeah. Anyway, the Elvis anecdote is worth watching the whole thing just for that, because it is a beautiful story, well told, and very funny.
I thought the scene where Short was a...
That's who Steve Martin is, sorry.
Well done, Mel.
The millennial in the room. I thought the scene where Short was the dummy and Martin was the ventriloquist was very clever.
Yeah, that was quite a throwback to other comedy.
It's old school comedy. It's just physical and situational, and I mean, it's just great. You don't really see too much of it anymore, and there's something sort of nice and comforting about it. And when it's done well, it really works.
Yeah, I did think one thing I would want to address. They were playing in a theatre in South Carolina, and there was a lot of jokes taking jabs at how we do things in Hollywood. There was definitely pitching right at Middle America, saying, "Let's laugh at these people who live out there in California." That's fine, particularly when it's people who live in California making jokes about themselves. They're entitled to do that, and if their audience likes it, then that's great.
Have you worked out who Martin Short is yet, Mel?
Well, he was in Prince of Egypt with Steve Martin.
That's definitely not their best roles.
Yeah, no.
Let's see, filmography.
Yeah, Three Amigos was probably his first major
Three Amigos,
role.
the second Steve Martin came up, that was the first one, and then his other roles. So I know Three Amigos, I really liked that. Oh, he was in Father of the Bride with? I've actually seen Father of the Bride.
Yeah, that's another Steve Martin vehicle, but yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
he's in Mars Attacks.
Martin Short is in Mars Attacks.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast actually today about that movie, and apparently they said that Tim Burton said, you're not really allowed to be Martin Short in this movie. You've got to tone it down, because he was the press secretary, and they gave him apparently one, scene where he could sort of let loose. But yeah, I mean, he's Martin Short. He's never gotten away from
a little shout out to the Small Beans podcast there.
Yes.
If you listen,
but no, just for the record, I love the Three Amigos. That's like really
wow.
an old movie I really enjoy. Oh, he was in How I Met Your Mother for 3 episodes.
Really?
Yeah.
What did he play in that?
Garrison Coots. Don't know which episodes. Just his 3 episodes.
All right. Let's move on from that. I would just say, if you've ever liked anything Steve Martin or Martin Short have ever done, just give this an hour and watch it, because you'll enjoy it and you'll be happy.
I think
it's not going to change your life, but
not.
you'll just feel good for a bit, and that's all we ever really ask at this time.
Pop it on after dinner with a wine, and all your troubles will go away.
And you'll be in bed before midnight.
Yes. So. Just so you know, Steve Martin was in the 1979 Muppet movie as the insolent waiter.
I did not know that. There we go. Wow.
So you're talking about the Muppets?
How many stars, honey?
Oh, there's two different ways to review it. I could give it 3 stars as a Netflix comedy on its own, or I could just easily go 5 stars for just it's fun and you'll. So I'm going to give it 5. I'm going to give it a full 5.
Yeah, well, I'm going to go in the middle of what you just did because I think if you're not a Steve Martin Short fan, it's 3 stars, probably maybe even less. But if you watch their movies and you ever liked them, I think it's 4 stars.
Yeah.
Well, you guys have convinced me. Now that I remember who Steve Martin is, I'll give it a go.
Excellent news.
Good job.
So what's next?
Trollhunters!
Okay.
You're like the only person excited because you're the only person that's seen it.
Yes. Look, so this is Guillermo del Toro's personal thing. He wrote the book Trollhunters that the show's based on.
So he actually wrote a book.
He wrote a book. Yes, he's a very talented man.
Is that the only involvement he had with the show?
No, he's like producing and writing and created by, and this is very much his baby. It's a CGI thing, so admittedly, you know, it's 2018 and Toy Story came out in
A long time ago.
It's that kind of level of animation.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I thought they'd moved beyond that.
Well, obviously it's gotten cheaper to do that.
Ah.
The voice acting, I might add, is superb. Kelsey Grammer is obviously the biggest name associated with the project, but there's a...
Does he... Well, he would have made a lot of money on Frasier. Does he still have to keep doing this kind of stuff?
I think he's a great character.
Maybe he's like just doing it for fun.
This is...
Yeah.
Look, I don't know what kind of money...
If I had sort of Kelsey Grammer's kind of money, I just think I'd just be, I don't know.
Be a person of leisure?
Yeah. But I guess maybe leisure costs a lot of money.
I think he's got expensive tastes.
Yachts aren't cheap.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, yachts are the cheapest thing I think that's going on in his life. Look, the sound engineering, I mean, as, you know, we've got a medium level sort of 5.1 sound rig in this room, and it just pops. There are moments when the world tears apart and you feel like your world's tearing apart. So the sound engineering is great, which, you know, the last Series 3 dropped a week ago and I just watched it all in 6 hours. And
I slept on the couch.
Yeah, occasionally being disturbed by the world being torn apart.
It was disturbing and I had some weird dreams.
And look, Jim, the hero protagonist, it's a good hero. A lot of vulnerability, a lot of real bravery, and when I say real bravery, that's where you're afraid, but you do what you have to do to save the day, even though you're afraid and even though you don't want to do it. The greatest hero ever is Hector in the Iliad, and no one has surpassed Homer.
That Trollhunters is like Homer.
That's
a pretty big call. Big call, John.
If Homer was alive today, he'd be doing something like Trollhunters.
Oh, really? Well, that's interesting.
In fact, I would say Guillermo del Toro is about 3/5 of a Homer, which is high praise.
Is that a unit of measurement?
Yeah.
3/5 is a very...
I would say Shakespeare is 4/5 of a Homer, Guillermo is 3, and everyone else is something less than that. Well, I mean, maybe not everyone else. I can think of a few other films. You know, Nolan's.
Me? Am I?
I haven't seen your films. Nolan's probably a 4, 3.5 maybe. But anyway, let's moving away from that. Trollhunters. So it's young adult pitched. It is animated, but it's, if you haven't watched it and you like the magical, the fantastical, the heroic, it's really good. The characters are really interesting and fascinating. Jim's mum is... you don't see a bad doctor portrayed, but she's a terrible doctor. She's nice, she's charming. No one dies because of her constant misdiagnoses. But,
so she's just like a regular doctor.
Yeah, but they never quite come out and say it, and they're always like, oh, it's Jim's mum, Jim loves her, she's nice, but she can't cook, she's always drinking, she has bad taste in men. She's very human. And whenever she's called upon in a professional capacity to make a diagnosis,
she's mediocre.
She gets it wrong.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm giving Trollhunters 5 stars. I really like it. I think more people should watch it, although given that Netflix have given it 3 series so far and haven't ended it yet, I would guess it's doing alright. Excuse me. Now, before we go, Mel, where can people find you?
So I'm part of the Podcast Network, so we're at mmpodcastnetwork.com. There's links to our social media. I can be found on Facebook under the same name. So if you're interested in wrestling, Harry Potter, or Buffy, I've got you covered.
She covers all the bases.
That's pretty much the whole world, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's all the 90s.
I should really identify with this much more. You're looking at it ironically, though, aren't you now? Being a millennial.
Yeah, it kind of is. Like, I don't remember the 90s that well, I'll admit. But it is weird to watch the World Wrestling Federation, as it was known then, compared to, like, Buffy. And I'm like, these can't be happening at the same time. One of them's really respectful towards women, and the other one has them running around in see-through skirts and tearing each other's clothes off.
Yeah.
I think they had different audiences.
I didn't really like Buffy in the 90s, I have to say. It was a failing of my youth. But I did get into it later, and it's a great show.
But yeah, so people, if you're interested in that, find me. All my shows are on iTunes, Chosen, Witch Weekly, and the Triple Threat Cast.
Awesome.
Okay, and on that note, we thank you for listening to this extended edition of the Give Me the Right podcast.
And thanks for coming in, Mel.
Yeah, I think it's my fault that it went long.
No, it's not.
It's all mine.
Everything's always John's fault.
That's true. I'm the only man in the room. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Bye.